now called to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Mrs. Kramer?
Here.
Mrs. Lane?
Here.
Mrs. Rich?
Here.
Mrs. Gallagher? Mr. Kraftcheck?
Here.
Mr. Parzak?
Here.
The meeting is now open. Adequate notice of the meeting was provided by posting a copy of the time and place on the municipal clerk's bulletin board and mailing a copy of same to the press and the Cape May County Herald on January 4th, 2017. Will everyone please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just so everybody is aware, where's Mr. Schweikert? Mr. Schweikert told me that he's been watching our recordings for meetings when he misses them. He's watching them online, and he said our voices are fading in and out, and he asks that everybody speak into their microphones. He did point out he has no problem ever hearing me. Story of my life. So we'll get started with public safety. Mr. Parzak.
We will start with the court administrator, Mrs. Scott.
Happy holidays to everyone. Really nothing to report other than our quarterly meeting went fine. All the judges, administrators really enjoyed the facilities. It's the first time they've been down here since everything was renovated. So, Merry Christmas.
So there's no capital budget requests from the court
Not
administrator?
at all.
Very good.
We're trying to keep everything status quo. So I have nothing that's going bad anymore.
Good.
Okay?
Anybody have anything else for court? Thank you.
Chief Stanford?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
The fire report for the month of November, we had 18 fire calls and 33 EMS calls. We're still down from last year slightly for our totals. November calls included 1 building fire, 2 cooking fires, 1 extrication from a structure, 1 elevator emergency, 1 gasoline spill, 2 gas leaks, 1 arcing wire, 2 cover assignments, 1 smoke scare, 5 fire alarms, and 1 carbon monoxide alarm. I have 1 request for capital budget. That is a new pickup truck. Originally, we were going to be requesting 2 vehicles, but Mr. Parsik told me this was a tight year and to tighten up my requests.
It's gotten tighter since we talked last time. You know that, don't you?
No. Yeah, I have to try. I get the wheels. The vehicle that's being replaced is a 2003 pickup truck. The pickup truck that we're using is our primary water response vehicle. It's the vehicle that carries all of our water response equipment and our wave runner, so it needs to be replaced. The request is for $60,000, which includes the pickup and all the equipment for that truck. The other vehicle that was going to be replaced is a 2007 Dodge Durango, which is in horrendous condition. The hope is we'll get through the year. If not, the pickup truck that we have now can be used in that place since it's in a little better shape than that other vehicle. And then we'll reevaluate in next year's budget to see what we need to do for that.
So I must have misunderstood you then. Did you just say that you could get by without a vehicle this year? No, you didn't say that.
Vehicle for the, we can't have a vehicle that's 15 years old for our primary response vehicle for water rescues. If that vehicle fails, there's no other vehicle to take its place. So the plan is to move the present vehicle into a non-response position. Currently, the Dodge Durango, which if you want to take a look at it, sits outside. It's all rusting through the body, and it needs a lot of work. Once that vehicle dies, the pickup truck will take over that duty of the fire inspections and the schools and all until that vehicle dies.
So the Dodge Durango will become your second response vehicle. The new vehicle you're requesting would be your first response
The
vehicle.
first will be the new pickup. The second will be the older pickup.
Okay, and then the
We don't
Durango.
expect, we've had Public Works looked at the Dodge Durango. It's been under water for both Irene and Sandy. Actually, the body's rusting through. I don't expect it to last through this year, but we'll see. So it's, yes, one requested vehicle for $60,000.
Okay. Getting two.
Well, when Ray talks, I listen, so.
Anything else?
Thank you.
I have, before you sit down, Roger, I have a certificate of appreciation for the fire company from the Cape May County American Legion. I also have one for the police chief, if you want to, I can present them both, if you guys come up together. Come on up, chief, because he'd be coming up anyway, and they were brought to the clerk's office today, or to?
Jimmy today.
The other day.
Okay. How they read is, this certificate of appreciation is gratefully presented to the members of the Stone Harbor Fire Department and the members of the Stone Harbor Police Department in recognition and sincere appreciation of outstanding service, assistance, and dedication of your unheralded efforts in protecting our way of life in this great county and preserving it for future generations. Presented by Cape May County American Legion, Department of New Jersey, and it's from the Cape May County First Vice Commander Harry Shaky Weimer and the Cape May County Commander Shirley Giovanni. So there's one for each of you.
One second, there's a lot of light coming in that way. I want to get a shot.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The monthly report for the police department for November 2017. Excuse me. There were 73 motor vehicle stops and one adult was arrested. We had various officers attend some trainings here and there throughout the month. In terms of an update on personnel, Officer Meekouch and Dixon are still in the police academy and they are expected to graduate next month. So that'll be a welcome addition for both of them. We have one SLEO 2 working to supplement their loss, and he will be leaving at the end of the month. And we have 4 SLEO 2s that began recruit training in the Winter Academy for the summer of 18. They just started on Saturday. We had 5, but one didn't make it to class, so we're down to 4. I don't know what happened there. In terms of an update for the building, based on the bid that was awarded last month, we have a pre-construction meeting on January 4th, and we're still working on furnishings for the building with a contractor. Basically, that's pretty much it for the month of November for us. We wish you all a happy and safe holiday season and Merry Christmas.
Thank you,
Merry
Chief.
Christmas.
Anything else of him, Mr. Parzak?
Capital requests?
Yes. I don't know what you have first. I have computers, if that's okay. I'm going to start with that. It's a request for $10,000, excuse me, in order to remain current with software upgrades and technologies needed. We're basically in the need for a new server that we're in desperate need of. So that's what that's basically for. The next project is for a 4x4 all-terrain vehicle. Excuse me, it's an open-top 4x4, which will basically replace our quad that we had for the past several years. It's now out of service due to rust. It's just not safe anymore. The frame rusted and the bottom underneath rusted out. So we actually took it out of service this past summer, and we're hoping to request another one for the summer of 2018. This vehicle assists us in the point patrol as well as the patrols of the oceanfront beaches, which we'd like to step up a little more. And that request was for $15,000. The next request we had was for a frontline patrol car, a Chevy Tahoe SUV, and that was for $46,999. This is basically an annual rotation of our frontline patrol cars. That car, the new car, the proposed new car, would take the replace, would replace a vehicle that we have about 159,000 miles on right now. That vehicle then would get rotated down, and it's an annual thing that we do. The next request is for a new Alcotest machine, which is for drunk driving enforcement. I actually just got off the phone with the state police a few moments ago, just to get an update before I came in here. We've been carrying this money for several years now because the Attorney General's office has said the current machine we use, the 7110, is going to go out of service. And they've been saying that for several years, so we've been carrying the money. The trooper I just spoke to on the phone, who's with the alcohol breath test unit, said in 2018, we will be getting a new machine. The AG's office is going to come down eventually in 18 and say, as of this day, that old machine is out, and you have to get the new machine. So it's kind of a mandate type of thing. And that request is for $20,000. Excuse me.
How old is the one that the old one that they've been saying they're going to be replacing forever?
I believe we got that in '09.
Okay.
And the final one, which is the biggest one, unfortunately, is for the furnishings for the police building. That's for $250,000. We'd basically be starting from scratch with everything but for the current file cabinets we have in the records room. They're perfectly usable, and there's no reason not to bring them. Everything else, it's up for debate, I guess. We've met with a furniture contractor, like I said to you previously. He gave us a roundabout estimate just based on the schematic we provided him and what he thought would work in a building that size and what we would need. And he gave me a ballpark of around $200,000. But he said you should really estimate over that because you're going to forget things here and there. He gave us a proposal of a few things with desks and things. I'll be honest with you, I had no idea how expensive desks were.
Yeah.
And we actually pared it down a little bit. Some of the desks he had us written in for it's just not necessary. So, we're looking at it reasonably, and I put the 250 in just to cover us.
And also, it gets 24/7 use, so it gets
Right.
beat up 3 times
Right.
quicker than in any other office, too.
Right.
So you got to make sure you get good quality.
And that, I would say that's it, but that's it. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes to request all that. That's all we have.
The police building, are we expecting some pushback on that award, that contract award, or are we forging ahead as?
We actually received a letter today basically saying that, but they haven't officially filed yet, so when they do, Mark's office, Kyle, they're prepared to answer that.
So we still just continue to move ahead,
We do.
right?
At this point, yeah.
So foundations and groundbreaking would be, I know originally we had talked about November. That's before we went through some of the delays. So now are we looking at spring or?
Present time, we have the pre-construction meeting is scheduled for January 4th. So between today and January 4th, I think your solicitor will need to review the letter and give you guidance on whether to stop or continue to go forward. If we continue to go forward, the original schedule is to have occupancy by January of 2019, to be able to occupy the entire facility.
So even with a delayed start, you think, because I think that was
Yes.
our
Yep.
original, we could still make that.
Yeah, because we had put a little extra time in there for shop drawings, which, aren't absolutely necessary, but we thought we'd just give a little because we didn't want to start until the start date. And so our documents show the contract is required to have the building occupied by the 15th of January, 2019.
Okay, thank you.
So if by any chance it's delayed by any court action or whatever, then that would just add on to the completion date.
Anything else for police chief?
Nope. Not from me.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Captain Basaco is not in attendance. His capital requests, Jill, are,
There's a request to replace two 10-year-old boats with the oars. That's for a total of $20,000. There's a request for $35,000 to replace the existing lifeguard stands with the aluminum. One of the things that Jim and I supported with this change was the safety of the lifeguards. With moving it, they're a lot lighter, a less chance of back injuries. So we think it's actually a good idea to do that.
This might sound like a silly question, Jill. I hadn't asked you previously. How about lightning striking them or anything? Is that
They
not-
meet all the safety requirements. Yeah.
with the water? Okay.
Yep.
how much are they, again, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, what, how much?
35.
The lifeguard stands.
35,000.
Hopefully more than that. Because he's looking to replace
Doesn't
all of
say.
them,
I
correct?
think that's for all of them, right? Yeah. It doesn't say, but that was my understanding, that was for all of them. But I will make sure that I get all the manufacturer information that shows that they are safe for extreme weather, like lightning.
I think at the last meeting, we had heard some information on their lifespan. My only concern would be, so my guess is they're probably powder-coated aluminum to withstand the elements, but depending on how the process is, what happens is there tends to be, not so much from the salt air, but from the sand pitting, and it eventually erodes that powder coating exterior, and then once it penetrates that, it can be problematic, whereas, the wood ones are tried and true, and
Yeah.
they'll last a long time. but that
We'll
was
double
meant-
check. I don't think they're coated
Okay, so
at
they're,
all. Yeah, but I'll get all the manufacturer information and make sure it's forwarded.
but with regard to weight, I mean, speaking from experience, those stands are, those are heavy, and I could only, I don't know what figures we have on workers' comp claims with those stands over the years, but
Yeah.
looking back, it's significant, and if we can avoid that, I think it would
This
be
year,
to our
right?
benefit.
It would be interesting.
We
to
definitely
see
had
the-
one this past year.
Okay,
Did we just have one this year?
It would be interesting to see what the cost for the wooden ones, how they compare. I wouldn't expect you to have them. I didn't know you didn't expect that
I think
question.
there's no doubt the wooden ones are significantly cheaper, but I think the idea here is the maintenance
then the
and also,
maintenance
but just the
annual.
liability.
Well, the wood ones build muscles, too.
That's true.
I talked
Good
to,
training tool.
True that.
True that.
I spoke with Captain Vasaco today about this. His feeling is that besides the workman's comp issues, which I think we all have to be concerned about because we don't want to see anyone getting injured, most of the lifeguard stands need substantial overhaul over this winter, which falls to Public Works to do, if not reconstruct new ones, which falls to Public Works. And like Josie said, they are continuous maintenance. So we had one on the beach. I think we had one on the beach this year, an aluminum one.
Yes.
Yeah, 94th Street Beach. From what I understand, we're not going to have wheels on these. Because the prototype or whatever that they had on 94th Street had the wheels on it, but Sandy had said
Yeah, he
these, the
did not
ones that
want
we're
the
getting will not have the wheels.
Yes. Okay. And then the last request is to replace the canvas awning on the beach tag office and the north window beach tag office, and then new signs for the headquarters, for total $4,000 for all those. And that's his request.
And somewhere along the line, just to put it out there, we should be thinking about a new
Building,
beach
yes.
shack,
Yes.
somewhere along the line. I think we've been saying that for a couple of years, but that really needs,
It does
we need a
need
new
it.
beach shack.
we ought to really think about putting money in each year so that we're not hit with 500,000 or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
Put a certain amount in each year in a dedicated fund for the beach shack.
Well, being new to this, right? I mean, these discussions we have about these budget requests today does not necessarily mean that's going to make the budget, correct? This is
Correct.
just,
This
these
is
are just
just-
requests
yeah, this
we're
is a-
saying.
This is just
Correct.
the requests in general
Okay,
conversation.
'cause
We will have more
as-
in-depth discussion
When we see where we stand.
and
and
recommendations.
finalize it. Okay,
Correct.
all right.
Yes.
And Sandy Basacco tends to be a very, he just wants to work so well with mayor and council. He's going to be the last person to ask for anything. And the building is really in need of a total upheaval or raising and a new one. So just keep it in your craw.
Our emergency management coordinator. So JT, you heard it, you can ask for anything here. Doesn't just,
Sky's the
whatever
limit,
you think you
JT.
want.
Not getting a thing, but ask.
Ahead.
Good afternoon. As you may be aware, the gates have, the anchors have gone in at 96th Street and 3rd Avenue, as well as 95th Street and 3rd Avenue. So I'm not sure if the signage has arrived yet, but we are moving ahead with that, and I assume that hopefully that'll be able to be implemented the next time we're going to need it, which, as we know, will happen any day, I'm sure. As far as the cameras that we had spoken about at the last Public Safety Committee meeting, I am in communication with Dale Foster, and we are going to meet after the new year concerning this. The county's on board with letting us use the bridge shack that they have at the base of the 96th Street Bridge. They would like to have access to them through their public works, which I think is a good thing because it will probably be some type of agreement between us and them concerning that. He said that they would have to obviously execute an agreement and pass a county resolution. I also will talk to him about possibly putting cameras at the Free Bridge as well. My understanding is there used to be cable out there. The biggest issue is going to be getting the wireless, the Wi-Fi out there. That's all we're going to need for the cameras. So if there is cable out there, it won't be a problem. Cameras are inexpensive. We can do this for around $300 a camera. The biggest expense that we will see is around $200 to $300 per year per camera for storage of the imagery. Now, there's one company that I spoke with, they will store 30 days continuously. So if the police say had a burglary and we know it happened this day, they can literally go back and watch every minute up until the point that that could have happened, up to 30 days. And it's not a motion detector camera that just turns itself on. It records continuously. So that's where we would see the most expense. Hopefully, if we do get with County Public Works, we can work out an agreement, cost sharing with maybe the wireless or something. And again, those are things that Dale and I will discuss when we meet. He's on vacation, but he said we'll be able to meet at the first of the year. So that's where we are with that, but they are on board, and I think they're kind of happy that we're going to be doing it, and they don't have to. But he did say that their Public Works would absolutely like to be able to access it. Now, Roger and I spoke. It kind of opens up a can of worms with whether or not we're going to allow the public to have access to these cameras and this imagery as well. I know when the firehouse had our camera on the firehouse, it really, really helped with getting hits on the website, which is good for public information sharing, usually during storms. So I know initially we had talked about not doing that and just making these just for our public safety folks and obviously the county, but that's going to be something that the council really have to decide who we're going to allow to have access to the cameras. So also Roger and I had spoke about possibly putting one at the beach shack, a webcam that faces out towards the ocean, much like they have in Ocean City. They have several of them along the boardwalk that allows the public to look at the beach, but at the same time it allows us to see tide conditions and ocean conditions during storms. So possibly allowing people to have access to the camera at the guard shack, maybe not at the bridges. These are the kind of things that we're going to have to figure out. But from a cost standpoint, it's not going to cost us a lot of money. Especially, again, like I said, if we can get the county on board with maybe some cost sharing there. So that's where we're at now. I'm going to schedule a meeting with Dale. He said to get in contact with him after January 2nd. I have a lot of availability around that time, so hopefully we can get together and come up with some ideas. So, are there any questions on that? I know there's a lot there. Next, I have a Code Red webinar that I'll be attending tomorrow. Roger right now is the only person that has access to doing the Code Red alerts, and he wants to get me on board with that and doing that. So there's a webinar tomorrow morning I signed up for several months ago. It's the first time I've had availability to do it. And then once I'm done that, I'll get with him and he'll do the hands-on training. So not only now will Roger be able to do that, I'll be able to do that. So I think sometimes the eyes on the island need to be the ones that are doing that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So
Can you just describe a little bit more what it is, the training, what's the goal of the Code Red
The
Alert?
Code Red is the reverse 911 that we use, where people sign up for it and they get the alerts by a phone. It's all computer-based. You simply type in your message and it translates it to a computer voice and then sends out the message. I don't ever want to run into overusing it, but I've had some discussions with members of council. Maybe we're underusing it just a little bit. I think sometimes we take for granted, and myself included, that everybody that's here in the winter knows what floods, when it floods, and when to move their cars. So I spoke to Roger about it, and he's going to allow me to start doing that, as well as the 96th Street siren. It's all going to be a part of this. So we don't want to overuse them, because then we're where people become deaf to it, and we don't want that. We don't want people looking at their phone and going, the borough
Just
again.
automatically delete.
Exactly.
Right.
We want them to know when they look and see that number calling that this is something serious, that they need to answer their phone, something that they need to be made aware of. So there's a balance there, and we're doing our best to strike that balance. So
Okay, thanks.
You're going to use that on cell phones or home phones?
it goes to any number that you provide. So when you sign up to the reverse 911, you provide your phone number, and it'll call any number.
But it wouldn't call a landline if the electric's out?
Well, for telephones, electric's not provided through the power. It comes through the phone line. Now, if you have a cordless phone, that won't work if the power goes out. But if you have a regular landline, even if the power's out, the phone will work, because the power provided to the phone comes through the phone line, not the power lines. So it shouldn't be an issue. The phones go out, that's a different story.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
The county coordinator meeting is Thursday. I'll be in attendance. If there's anything major to pass, I'll pass right away. Otherwise, I'll save it for our next meeting. And right now, I have no requests for the capital budget. I feel like I should request something, but
That's all right.
there's nothing right now. The stove that we had that we thought we were going to have to replace, we are going to be able to repair it. So, and that'll come out of OEM budget.
Good.
Good.
So that's it.
What's the weather going to be like on Christmas?
Right now, they're calling for rain, but the temperatures are supposed to drop down, so there's a slight chance it could turn into snow. 60%. I actually don't ask me why I know that. I checked it earlier today, but we'll see what Nor'easter Nick has to say in a few more days. That's it.
Anything else? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merry
JT.
Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
That concludes public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Parzak.
You're welcome.
I always want to say beach recreation and tourism, but we're recreation and tourism.
Correct. Miranda, you're up.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon. So I'll start with the fun stuff, and then I'll get to my Christmas list. So the 2018 special event calendar is live on the Borough website. So all 2018 special events that we know thus far are confirmed and added into the calendar, and they're also available on the Borough app. So they are all in there if you're planning out your years. And big news, the Borough of Stone Harbor is teaming up with the New Jersey Healthcare Quality Institute once again for the Mayor's Wellness Campaign 2018. We're shimmying, we're excited.
Gotta win some money. Go win some money.
So last year, we were able to secure the $1,000 grant because of the video contest that you all were so helpful in creating. So we're still reaping the reward for that. So with that $1,000 grant money, we're going to be able to program a new campaign. We have decided to host an eight-week wellness program February 1st to March 29th in 2018 for residents of Stone Harbor and nearby towns. The outline for the 8-week duration will include walks with the mayor on Monday mornings at 9 a.m., and we'll select a different location in our town each week. We are also partnering with Cape Regional Health System to feature a speaker every Thursday evening, and it will take place at the 82nd Street Rec Building at 5:30 p.m., and it'll be about 45 minutes long, so it'll keep everybody's attention spanned. We are working with local restaurants to offer healthy menu specials, local fitness clubs to offer free passes to try their gym equipment or a group class, free health screenings, weekly morning yoga stretches with Stone Harbor Elementary. So we're involving the K through 4th students this year. So we'll get the kids stretching before they start to learn. So hopefully it'll focus them, at least on Thursday mornings. And then we're coming up still with many more active ideas to inspire our community. So if anybody thinks of anything else new, please shoot me an email. So free registration will start on the Stone Harbor Recreation website beginning on Thursday, January 4th. That's when I like to kick everything off, because that's the 4-week countdown to the kickoff, which will be Thursday, February 1st. So I'll circulate, once the new year hits, I'll circulate and promote through all the organizations. I'll send you all emails just with reminders of what's upcoming. But that is the snapshot into the 2018 Stone Harbor Mayor's Wellness Campaign.
And it's pretty exciting to include the school this year. We're going to have a captive audience of all students.
72.
From
92.
92. So what Dr. Myrtle, I met with her, and she loved the idea. So what they're going to do is they have their playground time 8:30 to 8:45. So we'll get them right after all, like running around and all rammy. So then they'll come into school, and together as a group, the parents will be invited and the entire faculty. And they're just going to do an intro to yoga for kids. We'll have them all in there. Probably end up being 10 minutes, really, is what it's going to be. And it's just going to be every Thursday. And the school is really excited to be a part of it. So then, as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm thinking maybe what we ought to do is maybe segue the Monday morning walks at 9 o'clock, because the kids go into school at 8:45. So let's tell moms that have dropped off kids that perhaps have younger ones that they can then put in a stroller, join the walks, or come over and then maybe come right over and be with the walks on the Monday morning. So we'll make sure that the school knows what we're going to make those walks at 9 a.m. on Monday.
Love it.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good. And the whole idea, and just to, speaking with other parents that know about this, they're so thrilled that this is taking place. And I think it's a great partnership. It's awesome.
Great. No,
Thank you.
we're very lucky. Definitely have a fortunate community that is welcoming to all our crazy ideas.
Yes.
So any questions on Mayor's Wellness Campaign? Okay, so on to my wish list. Okay, so for capital, we are currently in phase 2 of the pickleball and the tennis court facility. So the last piece of the puzzle is to construct a building. So this building would be approximately 595 square feet, and we're going to have in this small building, it would be functioning in a central location right, if you guys have been down to that complex, right outside the pickleball gates. So it's kind of in the middle of the complex. It would have, it would be the support building with a multi-user restroom for both male and female. So they both would have 2 functioning restrooms, in hopes that that will do away with the blessed porta potties. So that's our goal, is to do away with the porta potties, take, Stone Harbor and that complex to the next level. We budgeted last year for a chunk of the money that we need to outlay, but with construction costs rising, I am requesting $138,000. I'm sorry, $138,680,000 for the final phase 2 to complete the tennis and the pickleball support building.
Do we get any money from the county for that building, once it's done?
Not yet, because we need to construct this building.
But when it's done, we
When
would?
it's done, we will get the
Yes,
portion that they promised
Okay.
us.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is how much?
That building has to get finished in order for them to reimburse us for the whole project, so.
So we still have even that money hanging out there for the tennis courts until we get the building done. We don't get
Yes.
that money, but
So
we
that's-
also would get some of the building money back too.
Right.
Okay.
So it's a priority.
How
to
much
get
do they
that
owe
done.
us on the tennis courts? Do you know off the top of your head, or ballpark?
I should know this. I'm going to wait for
Significant
Jim,
amount.
so I don't misquote.
Just gonna look.
Because you don't get paid till the entire project is complete, correct?
Correct.
Right.
So it's the playground, the tennis courts, and the building, right?
Doesn't include Chelsea, though. That's a complete project, and we got reimbursed,
Correct.
correct? So that's a done deal.
Separate.
Okay.
It's around 600,000 that we would get back from them.
Okay.
That's good. So we'll just continue to program and try to recoup some of that loss. It's on the upswing. There was 12 of them out there today playing.
Really? Is that it for capital or no?
That's it for capital.
There's not the fit zone that we were looking at for what's for the old skateboard park?
We're on standby for that until we can come up with a better design that's, everyone can agree on.
Okay.
So the portion of it will still be used for the bicycle rest stop. So we're working with these lovely gentlemen, and we're getting all the,
So when they come in with it's going to be, a portion of it's going to be used soon for the bikes then?
soon, yeah, so we're hoping for spring construction, so we're,
Okay,
yeah, getting all the ducks in the row.
okay.
You also have hard true
Oh.
reconditioning for 6,900.
My apologies, I didn't print this out, and of course I'm
That was
going
it.
by technology. Oh, there's the tab.
That's everything that I have.
So hard true spring conditioning, my apologies. So hard true spring reconditioning is just a matter of the material that over the winter time escapes because of the wind. It needs to be top layered, top dressed with about 2 more inches of material, swept, scarified, and then rolled again, and the lines put back out. So it's beyond Tim and I's expertise. I've definitely tried. But to hire a contractor, it's $69,000, or I'm sorry, $6,900 for that one. That sounded better, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So $6,900 for the reconditioning of those 4 hard true courts.
Okay.
Okay? Good, thank you. Have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Miranda.
too.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
And that's it for Recreation and Tourism, Natural Resources?
That's resource. Okay, capital items we have for the continuation of the dredge management plan. We have 45,000 for Cowie. Part of that is to investigate Nummi Island, analyze the surveys for the Back Bay Lagoons, and project management, and then additional 15,000 for Stockton to do the annual surveys. So that's a total of 60,000 for dredge management. Then I have,
Jill, may I interrupt just for a minute on dredge management? You said to invest, 45,000 to investigate Mummy Island?
that's part, I was
Nummi
only
Island.
part of it. That was 13,500.
We did that before,
No, we have
years
not
ago.
done this, we have not done this study. It would be more of an archaeological. We have not done that study
to
yet.
see if King Nummy's there? What are we doing?
It's part of the requirement from the DEP.
Okay.
And wasn't that something that stopped us at one point?
Yes, that's what
Yes.
stopped
That the
us
word on the
several years
street?
ago.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
I
this-
was-
might
So
be
this
there
will
and it
be
stopped
investigating
everything.
that, meeting with the DEP to see if in fact we have to do that intensive study or not, so I'll be part of that. Then, this year, we are starting to appropriate, to establish our reserve funding for maintenance dredging and for beach replenishment maintenance program. That would be 50,000 for each, and that would go into a dedicated fund. And that's it for natural resources capital. That's it for natural resources, sorry.
I got shade tree report under natural resources.
Yep, sorry.
Marilyn Haley is the chair of Shade Tree.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The Shade Tree Committee met on September 13th to review the obligations of the committee and the accomplishments within the Community Forestry Management Plan. The committee reviewed the current Shade Tree brochure and feels that the information included is a good resource for homeowners and builders. This brochure offers a list of drought-tolerant indigenous trees that are recommended for planting within our town, as well as planting tips, and is available on the borough's website and at the Borough Hall Construction Office. The committee continues to assist Borough Public Works Department as needed and has provided as inventory on 2nd Avenue Islands for review and update, which is required on the Community Forestry Management Plan. I attended the 92nd Annual Conference of the New Jersey Shade Tree Federation on October 19th in Cherry Hill and completed the required core training along with representatives from Public Works. Core training is designed to familiarize individuals with the legal aspects of managing trees, basic science of trees, and the identification of risk trees situations. The tree planting program has been established for 2018. The Department of Public Works and Grounds crews are responsible for the care and maintenance of trees within the borough. The Shade Tree Committee members agree to keep vigilance as to the overall health of newly planted trees and to report any issues to the Department of Public Works. The funding for purchase of trees and maintenance is included in the annual Public Works operating budget and natural resources budget. A 10-year tree goal has been adopted by the Shade Tree Committee on October 12th and is an effort to help the Sustainable New Jersey certification. That's all. Thank you.
Marilyn,
Great,
I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Are you working with the Garden Club with the project in the 300 block with those trees?
I'm going to say yes and no. Kathy has been working. She's waiting for Scott Taylor to get back to her on what to do, but from what I understand, Public Works is all together on this.
Well, we met, Jill met, myself, Kathy met with Scott Taylor.
Yes.
And he did come up with only 2 trees. One is the locust honey, which is already there. But one of the suggestions was to put the trees in pots rather than put them in the ground because of the root system. So I didn't know where you were working with them.
She's still waiting for Scott to get back with her for some other information.
And then you'll correlate together?
Yeah. As far as I know, for that we will.
Yeah, that's the last that I heard too, is she's waiting on hearing
she's still
back from
waiting for him.
Scott.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I even reached out to him the end of last week, and I haven't heard back from him either, so.
It's been quite a while.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to Marilyn and Karen Lane. Thank you.
Anything else with natural resources, going right to Bulkhead Heights?
Right to the bulkhead. We can invite Stu Farrell to come up. He did the surveys, and he'll have some input, and then Remington also, and we'll have a discussion on this and hopefully come up with a recommendation so we can move forward.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I brought 2 things, one of which I'll just leave with you to pursue at your leisure. It is essentially a handout with regard to nuisance flooding, which sort of defines basically what our proposal was intended to do. I just thought it would be a good idea to put that together so you can see what has happened so far in Avalon Borough with the project which started about mid-August. There was an event that occurred as a hurricane called Jose passed into the Atlantic Ocean in September 19th, and there, with that, about midnight that day, there was about 1.4 foot maximum flooding in several of the sites in the streets, with a 6.7 foot tide, mean low water elevation. Normal is about 4.8, and floods begin around 5.5 feet above mean low water. and this was 6.7. So it correlates pretty well with what the instruments recorded at most of the stations. There are 13 stations in Avalon that are recording data, and I brought these. I'll hand them to Jill. Hand them out if she feels necessary. Okay, bulkhead heights. I made a list, I made a set of maps which we can print at 11 by 17, and I set them in the report to print at 11 by 17 inches so that you can actually read them. The first page of the set is an index showing the numbered maps as to what they cover along the borough waterfront. And number one is, we did two different views. One is based on the aerial photograph of the region from 2015. That's the latest one the state's giving us. With the heights in numbers, the elevations in NAVD 88 elevations, superimposed alongside the points that we took, and where those points are located on the various bulkheads that we did. So then the other set is the lot and block delineation, just a line drawing with the lot and block number in each of the lots and blocks, also with the bulkhead heights on it. So those have already been delivered. The report basically was based on, we did it another day after we worked on the lagoon surveys for the bathymetry of the lagoons, and we started down at Paradise Drive, and my colleague got out of the boat onto the bulkheads, and he walked the bulkheads. I got him off the bulkheads with the boat. If there was obstacles, put him back. I sat and drove. So I had the easy job, and it was a day like today, so it was pretty nice to deal with it. But anyway, every time he came to a new bulkhead, he took a point with the GPS. Now this is vertical is about a centimeter accuracy, so that's about that much. And horizontally, it's in millimeters, so it's a precision GPS unit. Each one of these, there were 831 total points taken all the way up to 81st Street at the border with Avalon, around each and every lagoon and every piece of the shore frontage. The interesting aspect of this was a look at in the report I gave this graphic, which shows the distribution on half-foot intervals of the elevations. I see you have that, very good.
Dr. Farrell, I handed out a packet. They actually have that aerial mapping you're referencing, which is at the back of your packet, and then the first page I handed out is that.
Okay, well, I'm just, essentially, though, that illustration shows you the distribution of bulkheads in the municipality. The largest group of them is between, I better go get them. All right, the largest essentially group is 6.0 to 6.5. 293 bulkheads fall into that category. Then there's two subsets, one at 4.5 to 5. There's 80 bulkheads in that group. That's the older bulkheads that have been there for 40 to 60 years. The other group is 50 at 7.5 to 8. And that's a group of bulkheads that all represented the newer set that have been built to higher elevations, either voluntarily or through your ordinance that you have adopted. Now, basically 95% of all of the values fell between 4 and 8 feet. And so that's basically a Gaussian distribution where a standard deviation, that's one standard deviation either side, is 5 to 95% of the data that's available for the standard deviation of what the variation in the data is. The smallest number was about 2.5 feet. There was one there. There was none between 2.5 and 3, and then the groups began increasing. Basically, all but 4 bulkheads are higher than 3.5 feet, which is normal high tide. which says that those places will flood at anything that's above normal high tide. And there are 4 bulkheads that are 9 to 9.5 feet high in NAVD 88 elevation. So there's quite a range, but there's quite a grouping. If you add the 5.5 to 6.5 together, you have basically 450 bulkheads out of the 831 that we defined. Now, the actual number of points that define all these is about 1,200 points, but if you have a bulkhead and you take the point here and it's level all the way over to here, what we did was just simply, when we went to the next bulkhead and got a new point, we just put another one alongside of it to say, okay, that one goes from here to here, this one goes from here to here, and so forth. The other thing that we grouped them was when a number of owners had previously cooperated, I guess, and built a bulkhead in front of 2, 3, or 4 properties all the same. And so there's a series of points, but there wasn't one in front of each and every house start to finish. So if there were 3 houses, there might be 3 points or 4 points along that set of bulkhead. And that also applied to the yacht club, which is a big area of bulkhead, and the municipal parking lot up at 81st Street, that too. The other thing about those 2 that we pointed out was that the yacht club bulkhead has a gap in it at road grade, which is about 3.6 feet elevation, but their bulkhead has a set of slots built into it where they bring out a 10 or 16 foot long 3 by 12 and drop them into, if a storm is predicted, so they can close it off. And I pointed out in the last line there, I recommended doing that with the municipal parking lot one as well. That will keep the water out of the streets a little better than just having it open to tidal flow when it happens. We feel that this is a pretty good assessment. The spreadsheet that went along with this had, I believe, almost every owner that we could get between the tax assessor and us and the state source of the lot and block numbers, realizing, of course, by now somebody has sold or bought, and so that information has to be kept up to date by someone local to keep it a current spreadsheet, because it's what Avalon tells me, it's a 5% per year turnover that they see. I don't know whether that's true everywhere, but it's a little bit more than 1 house a year gets sold in these towns, I'm pretty sure. And so therefore, if you have any questions, I would be certainly happy to see if I can explain what we did and why we did it.
I have a question. You said earlier when you started, Dr. Farrell, that it was, you consider a normal high tide at 4.5?
Well,
somewhere thereabouts?
Yeah, at 4 point, in the mean low water, the station up there on the Steel Pier, Atlantic City, gives it out in mean low water. You can change it to any other datum you want to use and see the data the way you want to see it, but mean low water elevations, 4.8 is the mean average tidal range in New Jersey. So if 0 is low tide, high tide is at 4.8. And, but if you switch over to using the NAVD 1988 datum, which is an engineering datum, not gated to either low or high tide, it's sort of in the middle, then high tide is about just a little under 2, and low tide is about -2.5. So the actual 0 in NAVD 88 elevations is somewhere between high and low tide. And it has come up since 1929 datum by about 1.3 feet. They're different by about 1.25 to 1.3 feet. If you have a 1929 elevation and you want to know what it is in 1988.
So these bulkhead heights on this bar chart are bulkhead heights from mean low water? Is that right?
No.
Using the 88 data.
NAVD 88 data.
88?
88 data.
So,
yeah, bulkhead elevation range, NAVD 1988 feet. So they are consider, even the lowest bulkheads, the one at 2 to 2.5 is at NAVD 88 high tide.
That's
So
the mean, let's be clear, we're talking about average.
average high tide,
Right.
yes. So the range between neap tides and and spring tides is about 1.5 to 1.75 feet, depending on the super tide or
Right.
king tides, they call them.
Right.
And that does not include anything that the weather does, which, of course, is storm surge.
Dr. Farrell, 445 homes are between the 5.5 and the 6.5, so they're safe?
Well, they're
In
safe.
layman's language, I'm trying to,
Yeah. All right, well, your normal flooding in a storm-type event is going to go about 6, well, in the little handout I
right.
put out there was the storm that was March 14th of this year. And according to the event that I copied, and I forget where this picture came from, it's in there of the cars, but that was from that March event, which put 2 feet of water in the streets. This one it went up to 7.79. So that was the storm of March 14th. So those things are generally predicted by the Weather Service, the media, and, newspapers and stuff like that. So those you get warnings for. People get told, there's a storm coming, northeaster's coming, et cetera, and you're going to see flooding from them in the range of 6+ feet under most circumstances. Now, Hurricane Sandy was one we kind of remember without too much trouble, and that was in the order of 8 feet. Now, further north you went, it got into the 13-foot range in New York Harbor. But down here, we were south of the eye when it came ashore, et cetera, so we saw flooding of about 7.7 to 8.2 feet, depending on where you were. So the goal of the bulkhead is not necessarily to keep the flooding out of town unless you're really going to, what's high enough? There's always a flood that's higher than what you plan for. So if you built them all to 9 feet, you could someday have a flood of 9.5 feet, and then it's like pouring in over everything. So the elevation that you decide on is going to be balanced between, you also have to remember, those backyards are somewhere around 4 to 4.5 feet. That's how high they are. So if you have a 9-foot bulkhead, somebody's got to be 6 foot tall just to see over it. So that's why you have to balance this. And the idea is to gradually move all of them to a common elevation. I think that's what the goal is ultimately. And so if you pick 7, a lot of towns have picked 7.5. Brigantine just passed one for 8, an ordinance for 8-foot replacement bulkheads. And several other communities are considering between 7.5 and 8 that I've been told of fairly recently. So nobody's going for 9 that I know of. But 8 seems to be a nice round number. 7.5 has been commonly chosen.
But what you're saying, if you have a property that's on 4 foot or 4.5 foot, now you're going to have to step up 4 feet.
Correct. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. We've been talking with the FEMA ISO folks about this and with the state about having basically a physical gate similar to this slot where you drop the planks in that they would have to put into, in a storm event. The other one is a little bit fancier where you have like the step-in bathtub type gates. The door closes and you clamp it down and that seals the bulkhead shut. It's a little more expensive to do that, but it's a way to have the pathway to the dock be at grade rather than have to climb up 4 steps and then climb down 4 steps over the bulkhead.
It's bizarre.
Well, it's either that or do one of these kinds of doorways in the bulkhead if the folks have a dock.
I think the information I handed out, the picture's worth 1,000 words, could probably help with this discussion. And to Joan's question, you have the information that Dr. Farrell presented, which tells you where you're at now. What are the bulkhead elevations along the bayfront? And you need context, right? Because you're looking at those numbers and what does this mean? What will the impact be to these properties based on these bulkhead elevations? So if you go to the second handout that's in your packet there, it has the state of New Jersey on the cover. And you flip to the second page of that handout. What that is that's an excerpt from the study that FEMA recently completed that gives you the predicted flood elevations for various flood events. So for example, I have it highlighted in red there at the bottom of the page, the 10-year flood event, the 50-year flood event, the 100-year flood event, and the 500-year flood event. And I'm sure you've heard this terminology before. Basically, a 10-year flood event would be an event that is predicted to happen about every 10 years. So it just gives you an idea of the types of flooding or the types of storm surge you should expect and how frequently you should expect it. So for example, if we look at the 10-year event and it gives a still water elevation of 6.3, looking at the data that Dr. Farrell has presented us with, you can get a sense of, for a 10-year event, which is a fairly frequent event, you're going to have, more than half of the bulkheads in town are going to be breached by that flood event. And then, of course, as you go up in intensity of the flood event, you're going to have more and more of a serious impact on properties in town based on the current bulkhead elevations that you have. So the second number, which is a range, for example, sticking with the 10-year flood event category, the 6.1 to 7.3 is giving you the range of elevations that account for the wave effect. So if you have wave action involved with these storm surges, tells you what the range of elevations for that flood event would be. So again, this just gives you an idea, and I think the way that this discussion progresses is Dr. Farrell really set the table for us describing, and this was critical information because if you don't know where you are, you really don't know where you should be going. He set the table with where we're at. We then have this information that FEMA has developed, which tells us what we should expect going forward with the types of storms and flood events that we may see going forward. And then if you flip to the next set of maps, what we tried to do here is if you open up the first map, and I want to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. The first map should say at the top, Stone Harbor elevation analysis, elevations below NAVD 88.7.0. What this is showing you is the area in red are locations along the bayfront that have an elevation, the land elevation in those areas are below elevation 7. The implication being, if there is a storm event that has a flood elevation or a flood event that has a flood elevation at elevation 7, those are the areas in the borough that would be impacted by that flood. The inverse of that is, or the way to think about this within the context of this discussion of where should we set our bulkhead elevation, is if you were to set your bulkhead elevation at elevation 7, and let's say magically we could flip a switch and everyone's bulkhead was at elevation 7, that is the area of the borough you would be protecting with that elevation in your ordinance at elevation 7. What we did was to give you, again, to kind of tie this all together, right below that heading in the red writing, we estimated, again, we picked nice round numbers for these maps. As you could see from the FEMA data, those flood elevations are 6.7, those types. So we estimated the frequency of such an event. So for example, we're saying about every 20 years or so, based on that FEMA data, this would be a quote-unquote 20-year flood event at elevation 7. And it's also important to take a look at that second line in red writing. 117 of the 831 points from Dr. Farrell's study would be in compliance today. So a very small portion of your bulkheads would comply today. And the significance of that is wherever we impose this elevation, there are economic impacts to building your bulkhead higher. It's more expensive to build your bulkhead higher. You run into engineering issues perhaps. If you have the bulkhead, the higher the bulkhead sticks out above grade, you need to run into face piles and different types of tieback systems to make sure that the bulkhead is stable. So again, like Dr. Farrell said, this is a balance. You not only have the quality of life issues such as your visibility and your access, but you also have possible economic impacts due to the cost. As you go higher in this elevation to build these bulkheads, you may need to go from, for example, a vinyl bulkhead to a composite bulkhead or even a steel bulkhead that is going to continue to increase the cost for property owners to meet your bulkhead ordinance. So we're going to go through 3 maps. The first map we're looking at is elevation 7. The next map jumps up a foot. And I think it helps to look at these 2 maps side by side, because what you can see is this is telling you that if you were to increase your ordinance requirement, say from 7 to 8, you could see the additional red shaded area in that second map. That's the additional area in the borough that you would be protecting if you were to increase your bulkhead elevation in your ordinance to elevation 8, and we were to comply with that requirement. So you could see the impact you would have of increasing the elevation to 8. And then, again, at the top of that map, you can see this would roughly approximate a 50-year flood event, and you would now be down to only 3% of your bulkheads, your existing bulkheads, complying with that requirement of elevation 8. And then jumping to the last map, this would be if we were super ambitious and set our elevation at 9, you would, you can see the red coverage over the island. You're almost protecting the entire island at that point from bayside flooding if we were to set our bulkhead elevation at 9. But again, it's a major balance here with, you know, feasibility, economic impacts, quality of life impacts on where we want to set our elevation in the ordinance. And obviously, this is going to be a long-term initiative to get our properties to comply with whatever elevation it is that we establish. So I think that kind of takes us from existing up through proposed, so to speak, as far as, and then of course, any increment in between 7.5, 8.5, you can visually see, you can kind of approximate what you would be protecting under those scenarios if you were to pick a flood elevation in between those round numbers. Anybody have any questions about the handout?
Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions?
I thought you
I'll now turn it over to Ray.
Just as a point of reference for me, so I can kind of put this in perspective. Your measurement on my bulkhead says it's 5.9 feet. So are you saying that if you picked a reference point of 7 or an elevation of bulkhead height of 7 feet, that I'm looking at approximately 1 foot higher than I have right now? Am I reading this right?
Yes,
Okay, so 8 foot would be 2, and then 1 from there, right?
that's right.
Is there any, you know, this could take many, many years to, you're right, it will take many years to get where we need to go with this. In the interim, you know, I put the number just off the top of my head at maybe 35 or 40 bulkheads. This is just from my own observations in town that are causing a lot or contributing to a lot of nuisance flooding, where we really don't have, you know, we don't have water coming over most bulkheads, but there may be 30 or 40, or maybe there's 50, where at a 1 foot above a normal high tide, we've got water pouring over the bulkheads. You know, this is something I think we need to address in the short term before, you know, we get the whole island to where we want it.
Right.
Because if we don't, we're going to continue to have this nuisance flooding like we do several times a year now, it seems like. It's not a once a year or twice a year occurrence. It's, you know, several times, 6,
Yeah.
7 times a year, you know,
I guess
particularly in that the North Bay front.
Right. My comment on that would be, I suppose you're saying there's that handful of bulkheads that are just super low, right?
Yes.
The lowest bulkheads in the borough. So if the solution to that is that these property owners are going to replace their bulkheads, then at that point, you may as well have them replace it to whatever our new elevation is, because at that point, you're talking about the difference of 1 or 2 feet, maybe. In other words, I don't know if you're suggesting, Ray, that is there something we can do if that bulkhead is at elevation 4, can we get it up to elevation 6, so that we're not going to have that nuisance flooding on those really low tides? If the answer to that is we're going to have them raise their bulkhead 2 feet, then it would be cost effective at that point for them to just raise it to whatever the new bulkhead ordinance requirement would be.
What's the DEP requirement right now, Ed?
Well, there really isn't a DEP requirement. These are all, as Dr. Farrell said, these are all being dealt with locally.
In fact, most of them were just done by the individual owner.
Right.
I mean, there was no,
I-
ordinances have appeared to specify finished bulkhead elevation, but it's relatively, it's new in the last decade.
I know that, but I thought that DEP, when you went for your permit for a new bulkhead, specified a certain height.
No.
Not really.
Oh, generally, the architect will put a design
Yeah,
elevation
it's
for that
based on,
bulkhead.
it's based on the town's current ordinance
ordinance.
requirements.
Yeah.
Our current ordinance.
Right. Jill,
All
our
right.
ordinance is 7.5 right now, correct? No
Ours
higher
is
than.
7.5 on,
It's 7.5 on a moving target. It's 7.5 on above mean sea level. It's not actually set on a datum.
On
And-
datum.
And,
I
it-
thought it was on the 29 datum, that's 7.5.
no, I looked at it, I thought it was above mean sea level when we looked at it.
That's what the ordinance says.
Right, that's what the ordinance says. So that, you calculate mean sea level locally, so that, we looked at it, you're probably at around 7.2, let's just say something like that on the 88 datum.
I think on some of the ordinances, they use, mean sea level when they really mean the datum at that point in time, whether it were 29 or 88. So I think some of these ordinances are misusing the information. As we move forward here, what we're really talking about is using 1988 and establish the elevations.
The other point is, remember, when someone replaces a bulkhead, it's a major investment, and they're looking to keep that bulkhead in place for 20, 30 years. So and that's the purpose of this ordinance, is that we want to look into the future and set an elevation with the understanding that when someone comes in and replaces their bulkhead, they may not replace it again for another 20, 30 years. So you want to make sure that you're setting that bulkhead elevation at an elevation that's going to hold up over time.
So what we're contemplating is for replacing bulkheads or new construction. Is that correct?
I think it would be triggered when you reach that threshold that was implemented, which is now 40% over a number of 10 years. 40% of your assessed value, correct me if I'm wrong, over any 10-year period would trigger that. That's an event where now it's so substantial that you would have to replace your bulkhead. But then obviously new construction would be trigger that event obviously as well.
Just
So you,
for-
and
just-
raise your house, correct?
And raise your
Both,
house,
Raise your
absolutely.
house and do your
Absolutely.
bulkhead at that 40%.
Just for a point of information, I just had mine replaced as we speak, just finished, on Pleasure,
Okay,
at the ordinance level, 7.5.
okay.
So that would stand, I'm not going to have anybody come and say,
No.
you got to raise it again. And it is quite an expense now.
No, but it's,
It's $1,000 a square foot.
A
least.
linear foot.
Linear
Yep.
foot.
Yes, linear foot.
Yeah.
okay, so we have it, it's a two-step problem here. When we establish this new bulkhead height and we have the 40%, we have the new construction, there's no questions asked, the bulkhead has to be replaced, and it has to be replaced at the right height.
Correct.
We still have these 40 or 50 or 60, however many properties there are here where there's no new construction going on, there's no 40% issue, the people are living in their cottage that they like, and they've got a 1-foot-high bulkhead.
But the
So we still have to come up with a way,
right.
whether it's
And
an
that's right,
assessment or
that's
whatever.
right, that would be a
That's like
policy
phase two.
decision that you guys, right, the second phase would be, what do you want to do with those?
Right.
Do you want to identify the 30 or whatever amount, and do you pass an ordinance that requires them? Do you put a mechanism in there where they can get a no interest, low interest
Exactly.
loan for that? Does the borough want to foot the bill? I mean, you have those options, but.
It's something, it's the second part that we have to do to this.
Correct.
So does Dr. Farrell's data give us what we need to identify those 40 or
Yes, I
50
think we've- we
properties?
have-
Well, actually,
by
when
parking lot.
I look at this, it
Yes.
looks like the ones that are really derelict add up to be 13. Am I
Right.
correct in saying that?
Well, the
Because
really low
this-
ones are 13. If you go up to 5.0, you have 144 of them.
But this is based on the 88 datum, which presumes that 0 is a mid-tide, an
Yes.
average mid-tide. So that average high tide would be 2
Right.
on this datum. So everyone that is up to 2 feet is going to be covered at a regular average high tide. No, but then when you get up to another 2 feet above that, that only includes 13 properties. So 2 feet above the average high tide, there's only 13 properties that are at or below that, 4 feet and under.
Well, you could take, I'm
So
sorry.
it depends on
Is
where
it-
you want to draw the line, and I would certainly ask for your opinion in this regard, because you are much more the expert at this than we are.
Well,
So where do, if I may, where do you?
nuisance flooding begins at about 5.5 feet mean low water, which then translates to about 2.5 to 3 feet NAVD 88. So if you were to replace the ones up to 4.5 feet, you would have about, you'd have 51 plus 13, 13.
65.
64,
Looks like
yep.
You'd have your
64 of them.
Counting the one on the end.
Yeah, well, that was pretty.
So if
But-
we go to 4 or 5, then in your professional opinion, that would mitigate a lot of this nuisance,
Absolutely.
the nuisance high tide flooding that we
Correct,
get.
absolutely.
But I do think we have to step carefully with taking into consideration possibly, and I don't know for a fact, that these 13 homes are people that have lived in this town and living out their dream and retired here and cannot afford to put in a bulkhead, nor do I think it's fair to put an assessment on them so that when they die, they pay it back. I'm not for that. So that has to be, we have to really seriously
Yeah,
think
we-
about
we
the
have to figure-
consequences of that.
We have to figure out a way to facilitate this happening, because it's not fair to flood the entire neighborhood
Right.
because of one low bulkhead.
Correct.
Right.
It behooves the borough to somehow come up with a way to solve this issue without undue burden on the people like you're talking about, because we all realize that we have families like that here in town.
We do.
And you're not saying just 13, though.
No.
No.
No, he's
No.
saying 64 or
Yeah.
65.
I thought we're going more up to the 80 plus the 51 and
Well,
down.
that's what I was thinking,
Yeah.
because that's 4.5 also. You have it from 4.5 to 5.0, so,
But if our goal is just to really
145.
mitigate or minimize nuisance flooding, it depends on what the goal is
Yes.
here. Is the goal to mandate that, hey, we want to take care of nuisance flooding and not any of these events that are maybe, 20-year events that, and you end up with a storm at elevation 7. So that's a 20-year event according to these maps. And Sandy was, what, 8.8, did you say? Is that correct? So somewhere between the 8 and 9 maps is where we ended up with Sandy. So what are we trying to achieve by mandating certain bulkheads to come up to a certain level? Are we just trying to mitigate the nuisance flooding? Is that the goal?
No.
And then,
No,
so
we're-
then
no,
you want to
no.
include more than,
No, I think what we need to do is select the bulkhead height going forward, that, as I said before, that all new construction or 40% improvements,
Right.
you've got to meet this new code.
right.
Okay, and that's what it would be. In the interim, we have these 40 or 50 that we have to make some kind of temporary fixes on, or some arrangements, so that if it takes 30 years to get all the properties up to 9 feet or whatever we decide, we're not still flooding the neighborhoods in the interim with these low bulkheads.
Right, but I guess
Right.
that was my question, where are we making that demarcation?
I can-
Mayor Judy said, I thought we were including the 80. Now, according to Mr. Farrell, if you include those 80, then we're mandating above and beyond just nuisance flooding mitigation.
You're getting into regular, ordinary storm-type flooding.
Right.
That's the threshold, sort of.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, I took Dr. Farrell as meaning up to 4.5, and you could eliminate the nuisance
Right.
flooding that we're having now, not storm-related, just high tide.
I have some data from the Stone Harbor tide gauge over the last 15 years. On average, the tide exceeded 4.0 about 7 times per year. And on average, the tide exceeded 4.5 about 2 times per year. And once you get higher than that,
Yeah.
it's less than 1 time per
Right.
year.
Yeah, so there's a pretty much a good cutoff
Right.
for these common nuisance flooding at 4.5 to 5.
Right.
What
So then we're-
concerns me is how many of these 80 are at 4.5? Because this goes from 4.5 to 5, and you've got those 80. The other is 4 to 4.5.
See, if you
So how many of the 80 are at 4.5 if we'd want to eliminate the 4.5?
Right, how low are some of those
Yeah.
80?
Exactly.
Well, the spreadsheet has the exact values in there, and you can sort by the elevation to any criteria you want to throw at it. Just use the sort function in Excel, and you've got it. You'll be able to count noses by just sorting the spreadsheet, and there it is. It'll tell you exactly how many, and you can pick
And I'm looking like-
4.73.
It's like about
as your-
72 properties is what.
72 more, so 72 out of these 80 are at 4.5.
No, forgetting the 80, from the
72
51
altogether.
down, there's 70, what'd I say, 72.
Where you getting, I don't
Properties.
see your 72.
She's
Dr.
excluding
Farrell.
the 80.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
From, if you take the 51, the 9, the 3, and the 1.
Is 60, but that's
64.
64.
64.
Yes, that's what it
51.
said before.
And 9
Yeah.
is 60
I
and
think
3 and
Karen's
1.
point is that
64, sorry.
the 80 could include some at 4.5.
Right.
But I think regardless, if we make a demarcation, anyone that's under 4.5, 4.6, 4 points, whatever we choose to be that demarcation, it's on a map, we know who they are, and then they'll be subject to that ordinance. So regardless of which graph part this falls into, we can.
Right.
I would just like to know the number that,
Right.
that we're dealing with.
Right.
Especially if we're going to consider doing any kind of help to this, such as the interest-free loans or things like that. It's important for us to know that.
Is
So it looks
Dr.
like about
Farrell, is there a
64 properties.
possibility that some of these that you've put on there, they've already replaced their bulkheads?
Well, we did this just
Oh, just
couple of months
recently.
ago.
Yeah,
So you
did
did
the
it,
other day.
okay, fine.
There were bulkheads under construction. There were 3 bulkheads under construction when we did this, but they were also part of a house rebuild too. So the bulkhead was in, and we did that. So that one has been, those have been counted. There was a couple of guys putting in pilings for, for boat tie-up, but I did not see a complete bulkhead operation started or underway. But there were brand-new bulkheads that had been built. There were 3 of them.
Well, with this new bulkhead height, I do have to step up from my property.
Right. One other.
But I think you would, but not, now you would not have to until there
I
was.
do. No, my bulkhead was just finished. I have to step up.
I would, no, I don't think that that's accurate, correct? If the
No,
new
well,
height is set now, we wouldn't have to do it, you wouldn't have to do it now.
No,
It would be next.
her physical layout.
Physically.
Just to walk over it.
Physically, I have
Oh.
to step up.
Oh, okay.
Physically,
I
I
see what
have
you're
to
saying.
step up.
I mean, those type of things with having to step up are things that we've been discussing at the planning board level where, and it's part of our ordinance options where you can backfill and grade it down. So there are other options out there to avoid that drastic stepping up and stepping down.
And I mentioned this.
Plus, some of the things, what Stu has mentioned.
At planning board, I think here before, in my experience, that's not a real concern, because most of the new homeowners that are doing new construction on the bay are transitioning to that new bulkhead height pretty seamlessly. So we all sit here and envision that situation where an old cottage at grade level, where you step out 1 step to grade, is now putting in a new bulkhead, and then if there's a seawall that they're looking out on. That just doesn't happen, and I haven't seen it happen. Could it happen? Yeah, but
But it does happen, Charles, on the older homes like mine. And it's not that high, it's about a foot
right.
that you step up, that you're not stepping up like
Right.
that.
So now the houses are higher, there's decks, you're walking
When you
across
have a
everything.
brand-new home, it's not a problem.
Right, my point is, I think
Right.
my point is that generally speaking, it's not a problem. But again, yes, there could be instances where it
You have to step up.
does, yes.
Well, a lot of these bulkheads had decks or walkways on top of them. And so we actually had to worry about whether this was an impervious surface we were measuring, or whether it was part with the decking, and, okay,
Right.
we tried to deal with that as we did the points. But yes, I'd say about a third of the bulkheads had some sort of walking surface on top of the bulkhead itself, even cantilevered a couple of feet out over the water. So this
The
is
cap,
common.
The cap, yeah.
Yeah. One minor detail is where bulkhead A meets bulkhead B from a different owner. There's got to be, on some places, we saw 4-foot gaps that went right down to the mud.
Wow.
That's one bulkhead was finished, the other guy comes up and he stops right there. And so there's this little window, which a lot of water can get through if you haven't checked those for water tightness.
Very interesting.
So now we have all this information, and the maps, there's good maps, very good visual, showing the difference in the bulkhead heights. So where are we going from here? We're talking about this in planning board, we're talking about this here, we've got our subcommittee, our ad hoc committee, so who is taking this information and where is it going next?
Wait, before we start, I just want to mention one other thing that came up here. And our ordinance, again, states 7.5, but that's from sea level. So, and I look at a couple bulkheads here that I know that were done to our ordinance at 7.5, but are showing up here as 6.7. So just so everyone's on the same page, the highest we're really going in the borough now, according to these bulkhead heights as measured, and as per our ordinance, will show up here as 6.7. So what we have, even though our ordinance says 7.5, that's from a different measurement.
Oh, yeah, clearly.
So right now, the highest bulkheads in here, and I don't know how some of these are at 9 or above, because they would be in violation of ordinance. Because in our ordinance, 7.5 really equals 6.7, so that gives you about another 3/4 of a foot. So anything over 7.5 here is really in violation of our ordinance right now. That's another discussion, but, and it's not necessarily a bad thing depending on where we're going. They may be compliant when we do what we do here. But just before we begin the discussion, our 7.5 equals 6.7 here.
Yeah, I don't know that the 9s would be in violation. You would exceed the minimum. I don't know that it would be a violation.
I think
Is
we have
there
a
a
maximum
maximum?
height of
That's what I was gonna say.
7.5
Is there a
in
maximum?
our ordinance. Is that correct?
Does anybody know, is there a
It would be the
maximum?
minimum of 7.5.
I think it's set at 7.5, but you can't exceed that.
It's silent.
Right.
Yeah, it's silent, so it is
Okay,
up for interpretation.
okay.
Well, before we,
20.
let's ask our engineers. Do you have a recommendation on bulkhead heights? I mean, this is based on I mean, we've been talking about flood mitigation for over a year now. So in concert with all of that's going on, what would you recommend?
I think you can sense, and I'm not dodging your question, but I think you can sense that because this is a balance between policy and quality of life and economic impact and basically non-engineering issues, and then we're providing you with the engineering data that shows kind of the impact of setting your elevation at different points. I don't know that we can do that balancing act for you. We can help you do that balancing act and give you the data and kind of run through the scenarios with you. But I think, and it's been my experience in other municipalities, it becomes a policy decision that gets kicked around like we're seeing here today, that you end up making as a governing body.
Okay, he dodged that question.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I won't dodge it.
If you,
Stu,
I
do you
see
know
what he's
where
saying.
Avalon?
You're
No, I understand
giving
what
us
you're
the
saying.
facts.
If you
You're giving
look-
us the facts, and now you're saying
If you
you
look at the-
decide how you want to impact your residents. You go higher, you want to go lower. I get
but
it.
if you look at your,
One-
if you look at the maps of 7 and 8,
Right.
elevation 7 and 8, you can see a foot has not that much of an impact on that area that's protected. And if you go to 9, you're covering the whole island.
Yeah.
My
So-
thoughts on this initially are, I want to be prepared for another Sandy. So Sandy was 8.8. I feel like we should be addressing flood mitigation with that type of event in mind. Our current bulkhead heights that come to our 7.5 are at 6.7 as per these maps. That would be an increase of slightly under 2 feet to what you get conforming with our ordinance as written now. And that, in my opinion, protects us from an event much like Sandy to a greater degree. And isn't that really what we're looking to do here, is to prepare for the long term rather than, I mean, certainly we want to take care of these derelict bulkheads that are way below where they should be, but if we're looking 50 years out, you know, that Sandy event is
Yeah.
really,
Just to.
that wasn't
count-
even, that wasn't a direct hit.
Right.
That was a northern New Jersey event. That was a near miss for us, so.
To counterbalance that, and again, just to facilitate discussion here, when you get into those larger events, like the Sandy-type events, this is where everything starts to work hand in hand, where you have your other ordinance that is controlling your finished floor height. If we know we have a Sandy coming, you know, there's going to be an evacuation, you're setting your new finished floor elevations above those 50 and 100-year storms so that you're protecting your homes from those storms by elevating your homes. And at that point, you know, you could say that maybe the bulkhead isn't, you know, that's how they work hand in hand. The bulkhead is meant for the lower frequency storms to prevent nuisance flooding and also some more substantial storms. When you get into the 50, 100-year Sandy-type storms, that's where your finished floor ordinance kicks in to give you protection against those larger storms. And that just is another
Right, there's other
point to
pieces.
factor into the discussion.
Stu, didn't Avalon just raise theirs? Do you remember what theirs is? Are they at did they go to 7.5?
I think they went to 8.
They
went
just
to 8.
reduced it to 7.
They may.
They went from 8 to 7.
Oh, they went back to 7?
They did.
Okay, that was quick.
They passed one in May to go up and passed June to go back down to 7.
Year apart.
Okay.
All right.
So where do we
Why
want to go
don't,
from
why-
here?
I would recommend, we have a flood mitigation subcommittee, correct? So
Yes, yes.
why don't we take that to that subcommittee, and, you know,
Weren't we waiting for this
And-
study before we
We were
started
wait-
to meet
Yeah, we were
regularly?
waiting for
Okay.
this. This was the crucial point, so that we
Okay.
we
And
can
we'll-
reconvene and then come out of that committee with a recommendation.
And
It's
keep-
something that
okay.
I want to move on fairly
Okay.
quickly, so.
Okay, so everybody understand that? It's going to go back to that ad hoc committee.
I have one
Thank-
question
Okay.
before we move on. Does our present ordinance require, when someone buys a home on the bay, to replace the bulkhead and bring it up to our height?
Not if someone purchases it, no.
Should we be doing that? That would be a start.
We did talk about
we will. We will
Right.
going
I
forward.
think that should
we-
be going to planning board. That's something we could get a jump start on. That's a simple,
We can get from the ad hoc committee, that information's going to be fed to the planning board.
I don't believe that was in our draft ordinance, right?
all right.
Because we,
But you're
see, we don't,
correct.
if we did that right now, the first question would be,
How high?
what height do you want us to go to? And we're going to say, we don't know yet.
Right, we got to
So
decide on the
let's
height.
get the height, and then we'll build all that in going forward.
But I agree, that has to be done.
Okay, so
And
to
we've
be
talked about
continued.
that part, yep.
Okay. All right, so at this time then, we will adjourn and we'll take 2-3-minute comfort break and come back for the council meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Adjourned.